This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back to Live Talk with Dr. B. Hill. If we have any guests today that would like to raise their hand and questions, just use the chat on the right-hand side, and we'll be glad to answer any questions. So today, Dr. B, you want to discuss what we're going to talk about?
Oh, yes, we have Dr. Smith with us today, and we would love to talk to you about the children of people who have had withdrawal symptoms, who have been on opioids. There is strong correlation in things that are going on with them. And Dr. Smith, I'm going to let you go ahead and present it.
Thank you, Dr. B. I think we need to, and in fact, Dr. B, you bring up an excellent point. Before we go much further with this, we need to be able to agree what languages and what terms we're going to use, because this is different than what we're saying about the uh, person who was the primary impact of the DNA damage, the person who took the opioids and had the DNA damage to begin with, because we actually did a clinical trial with that group of people, and we showed that we could see the DNA damage, and those people with DNA damage showed abnormalities in their adrenalines, catecholamines during opioid withdrawal, and we actually took that evidence, that data, and we turned it over to artificial intelligence, and we asked artificial intelligence, you know, is this real? Is this really a population of genetically damaged people? And even artificial intelligence came back and said, yes, this DNA damage is real, and this DNA damage is the result of exposure to the opioids, and this DNA damage is associated with symptoms. The symptoms being that when our people try to stop taking the opioids, they get sick. We don't have that kind of scientific evidence at all here when we're talking about the the second and third generation that are involved. Really, the opioids have only been around long enough to really give us insight into three generations: the primary generation, the person who took the opioids, the person who sustained the original DNA damage, and then their children who never took opioids but inherited DNA damage, and then the grandchildren. We're beginning to this has been going on long enough that we have some grandchildren, and the question is, do these children, are they at risk of something? Now, it's very easy to jump quickly onto the diagnosis of and the term autism, and we're all guilty of that, myself included, because it gives us a framework from which we can have a discussion. It's a word we all know, okay? But in reality, we have absolutely no evidence that the DNA damage caused by the opioids and autism is related. We don't have that evidence yet. But by raising the question, we start the scientific process.
Dr.
And
Smith, though,
yes,
let me
ma'am.
ask a question, though. It is my understanding, and it's the scientific understanding, that you get half of your DNA from your mother and half of your DNA from your father. Therefore, if we have someone who has passed down their DNA to their offspring, then there's a good possibility that there's a problem there, if I'm not mistaken. And especially a problem there if the mother was on opioids and the father was on opioids. It seems to me that's almost double jeopardy.
B, I completely agree with you, but I'm going to force the issue that we have a responsibility to adhere to the scientific method, and
I
and
agree.
and in the scientific method, we must label certain data as observational data, Okay, hey, we can observe things, and that's observational data. We can label things as anecdotal data. Hey, I know 5 people who were opioid dependent, and they've had children with autism. Okay, and we need to have those dialogues, but it is upon us to push forward the scientific process and use the scientific method, and that means we must rely on statistical analysis. As much as none of us really enjoy statistics all that much, it is what's going to give us our early answers. And so, Dr. B, I'm gonna put forth my own theory here, okay? And you and I are gonna talk about this. We're gonna examine it right now. This theory is relatively new theory. Dr. B, it's my theory that if there is a connection between the genetic damage done by the opioids and whether or not certain children develop certain neurological pathologies, it's my theory that we'll find the early evidence in children who also had neonatal abstinence syndrome. Now, I'm not saying neonatal abstinence syndrome is causative. I'm not saying neonatal abstinence syndrome is causing learning disabilities or autism or anything else. But what I will say is the children who had neonatal abstinence syndrome share the risk factor of being exposed to the abnormal DNA. Okay, now they get a double whammy because they were also exposed to opioids in utero during the pregnancy, and it's hard to take those two threads and pull them apart and separate it. So if there is a correlation, it's not that strong of evidence. But if there is no correlation, that's the powerful evidence. So if we look at children with neonatal abstinence syndrome, these are children who were born to at least one parent with abnormal DNA. If these children do not show an increased prevalence in autism or other types of neurological diagnoses, then the pharmaceutical companies are probably off the hook. So,
But
Chrissy,
let
if you
me ask
would.
you a question. Here's an important question for me to have answered. The parents could have been on opioids and had their DNA ruined, okay? Poisoned, okay? And when they're carrying that child, they weren't on, the mother was off of opioids. So the child could be born without neonatal abstinence syndrome, but still have a poisoned DNA.
And that's the second group that we need to look at. Correct. I would say the first group we need to look at are children who were born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, and let's see if they have a higher prevalence of difficulties. The second group we need to look at are children who were born to one or both parents who had impacted DNA, poison DNA, methylation in their DNA. And then we need to start looking at the grandchildren. But Chrissy, if you would, put up that first slide. And B, I want to share this with you because I want to move towards an answer here. And
But there has been, and we have a panelist whose grandchild, or whose child came home from the hospital and was not diagnosed with neonatal abstinence syndrome, however, had all of the symptoms of being that diagnosis. They were restless, they were crying all the time, they were,
right, I'm sure it is missed in the hospital. Dr. B, can you see that that
I
graphic on the
sure
screen
can.
there? All right,
Uh-huh.
can you read it?
Yes, babies with withdrawal symptoms 68% more likely to have developmental disorders than those without.
Dr. B, I put forth that answers question number 1.
Yes, it does.
I put forth that answers question number one. Question number one could have gotten the pharmaceutical industry off the hook. Instead, I would say the hook just embedded itself in the skin of these companies, of the pharmaceutical companies, the manufacturers and distributors of the opioids. I would say the hook just embedded itself in the skin a little deeper. Okay.
A lot deeper.
Babies with withdrawal symptoms, 68% more likely to have developmental disorders than those without. Okay, if this is not DNA damage, what is it? Now, they're going to argue, okay, and this is a good argument. They've got a good argument, okay, that children who had withdrawal symptoms were high risk in many other ways. Okay, they may have received less prenatal care, and that's a valid point. They may have been born into less stable households. Well, that's probably a given. Okay, they may have had less engaged parents. Okay, that's a likelihood also. So this is not the final word. This is not the final word because there are so many what are called confounding variables, other things that travel together. These children probably came, you know, the all the obvious things. Okay, but if this had not been true, then yeah, probably not worth pursuing aggressively. But it says right here, babies with withdrawal symptoms are 68% more likely to have developmental disorders than those without. That to me says where there's smoke, there's fire. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes, definitely.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. And I would say that's smoke. That's pretty good smoke.
I'd like to see some graphs about the opioids, how the opioids affected children with autism. The same
I,
way that we have graphs that show how people were affected with opioids.
I got some graphs today. Before we get to the graphs, there is one other slide that I wanted to go over. So Chrissy, when you get a moment, if you could switch this forward to the second slide. Dr. B, can you see that?
Yes.
Can you read it?
Conclusions. Results of this novel analysis linking health and education data revealed that children with a history of NAS were significantly more likely to have subsequent educational disabilities.
Okay, my first question, I put forth that if there's going to be any meat on these bones, that we will see abnormalities in the children who experienced NAS because they carried the same risk factors. Now, I don't know how to get evidence any stronger than that. I mean, B, that's it's right there,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
I mean, 68%. You know, where in medicine, where in science do we get 68%? I mean, that's a big number.
Yes.
That's a really big number. It's not 100%, but it's too close for comfort. So, Dr. B, do you think we're looking at the possibility that these opioids have caused DNA damage to people who subsequently had children, and that do you think there's a possibility that this DNA damage caused some neurological or learning disabilities in these children?
I would say to you, yes. There is such a strong possibility it's not funny. In all the patients that I have worked with, I have been surprised at how many children of these people, of our people, have learning disabilities and autism.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I wish it wasn't so. I really
Yes.
sincerely wish it wasn't so. our people have suffered enough. To have permanent genetic damage done to your body is bad enough, and to suffer through the withdrawal state is bad enough, and to be labeled with a mental health diagnosis is bad enough, and to live with the consequences of the neurotoxicity is bad enough. But now we're adding on top of that, when these genetic defects are passed down to children and grandchildren, there's the possibility that the nightmare doesn't end. The nightmare just doesn't seem to end. But if you stop and think about it, Dr. B, in our study, we found profound genetic damage spread all up and down that OPRM1 gene.
Yes.
It would be naive to believe that you can have that level of genetic damage in a major gene. The OPRM1 gene, the gene that encodes for the primary opioid receptor. It would be naive to believe you could have that level of genetic damage and not have consequences. And those consequences we are seeing in the primary patient, the one who took the opioids, the one whose DNA was damaged. And now I think we're seeing the possibility of some damage, genetic damage, in the children and grandchildren. But again, I come back to the point. It would be naive to believe otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
You
know, I don't want to leave this subject, but you said something to me that sent chills up and down my spine when we first started talking. And you said that when you see something happening, that is the beginning of scientific evidence.
Anecdotal evidence.
Anecdotal evidence.
Anecdotal evidence followed by observational evidence. Yes.
Okay, so isn't that what happened with the opioids, with the pharmaceutical industry? Couldn't they see that there was a change? Couldn't they see that there was some anecdotal
you're talking about
evidence?
You're talking about how do you pierce the cloak of cognitive bias?
Exactly.
I don't think there's any better example I could give than our own experience with the FDA and our own experience with the CDC. Let's take the CDC, for example. You know, we put our evidence in front of 18 people at the CDC. Crickets.
Add this to it.
There's a line in the movie Scarface that I remember. I'm not going to quote it correctly, but the gist of the line is never underestimate the greed of the other guy. And here I would alter that line slightly and say never underestimate the cognitive bias of the other guy.
Yes.
Never underestimate the power of that cognitive bias.
They don't want to be wrong, Doug. They don't want to be wrong.
I don't understand what drives cognitive bias. I'm not even sure if cognitive bias is motivated by anything. If you really read what they write about cognitive bias and what the experts say about cognitive bias, and I would recommend reading about Dunning and Kruger. I think their work is by far the best. What Dunning and Kruger have done on cognitive bias, they basically conclude by saying these people that are incompetent, not only are they incompetent, but they're incompetent to even recognize their own incompetence. They're not capable of recognizing their incompetence. So it's not that they don't want to. According to Dunning and Kruger, they're not able to. And I understand what particularly Dunning means when he says these people feel buoyed by something that to them feels like knowledge. And I think that describes the whole opioid addiction crowd pretty well. They obviously feel buoyed, lifted by
Mhm.
something that to them feels like knowledge. It's not real, it's not scientifically sound, but to them it feels like knowledge. And I thought
Mhm.
that was an excellent insight. If I'm mistaken, Dunning wrote that. Dunning of Dunning Kruger. Um, I You can't argue with the guys. Even when we present the evidence, we don't get through their cognitive bias, and that just you would think that when presented with the evidence, a sane person would go, "Oh, wow, you're right. Oh, sorry, I was wrong." And I don't think it's that they don't want to be wrong. It's more they're not capable of recognizing that they are wrong. Why? Because the incompetent cannot recognize incompetence, even in themselves. It's an amazing thing. I'm never going to fully understand cognitive bias, but I've developed my own quote from the movie Scarface when I say, never underestimate the cognitive bias of the other guy. That seems to hold true.
Mhm. It's I do think that a lot of people can't take constructive criticism. They don't want to know that they're wrong. They have their stake in the ground that I was not wrong. You're wrong.
I will say this, and this is interesting. I don't know what category to put this in. It's too early yet. We sent out fax number 1 to 17,000 offices. Only one office requested that we remove them from their fax list, which leaves us with 16,999 offices. There is an openness to hearing what we have to say. I was surprised at that. Shockingly, the one that said, "Take me off your stupid list," was a psychiatrist. I wasn't surprised by that. Up in Wisconsin somewhere. I did note that. And by the way, B, um, we had a little glitch in the website. We didn't know really until yesterday. There were some requests that came in for information about the DNA test, about the class action lawsuit. They they went they were emails. They went exactly where they were supposed to go. We weren't accessing it correctly, so there's a number of emails that I forwarded you that people are probably scratching their head wondering why they haven't heard from us. And
Okay.
and and we apologize. It was, it's a learning curve. It's a learning curve, and we Jan and I made a mistake, and we found it yesterday, and I sent you those yesterday evening, B. And if you could reach out to those people and with an apology from us, that
Sure.
would they're owed an apology. They're probably wondering what happened to us. And hey, software glitch, you know. Um, just so you know, B, in the software industry, that's referred to as a SUE, SUE. That's the acronym for what happened to what Jan and I did. You know what SUE stands for?
No.
SUE stands for stupid user error.
Like GOK. God
And
only
by the way,
knows.
B, it's good to see you laugh. You weren't feeling so good over the past few days. It's good to see you. It's good to see you spontaneously laugh. It's good to know that at least some of my jokes are still funny. Oh gosh, B, I wish it wasn't so. Our people have suffered enough, and I feel like the bearer of bad news. But B, the science is, at least the epidemiology, the numbers. If we want to believe that the DNA damage is not impacting the children and grandchildren, if we wanted to believe that, the numbers are not looking good for us.
If
And
we wanted to believe that, we would put our head in the sand.
I know, but I hate to bring bad news to people who have already suffered.
It's not their
It's
fault.
almost like when you have to go back to the cancer patient and tell them the chemotherapy didn't work. It's just these types of communications with people are are devastating to these people. What is this going to mean? Are people going to start getting genetic testing done in utero? Are they going to start doing fine needle aspiration of fluid during pregnancy to see if the child carries an increased risk of autism? I mean, that, I don't know. I mean,
They do an awful lot of them now. Amniocentesis.
what if two people want to get married and have a child, and both of them have a history of opioid dependency, and both of them, I mean, should they get their DNA tested?
But you know what their DNA is going to show.
I know. The main reason for testing isn't to answer the answer. We pretty much know the answer. The main reason for testing is to hold these companies accountable.
Well, it's also the main reason also is to prove the fact that they are not addicts, that it is not a mental diagnosis, that they need the proper treatment, that they're not getting the proper treatment. And somebody needs to be held accountable for that.
Yeah, that's the main. That's where the DNA test is really gonna have impact, is holding these companies accountable. But the list of what we're holding them accountable for
Is growing.
is growing. Yeah, we're holding them accountable for genetic damage. We're holding them accountable for what is now about 3 million premature and unnecessary cardiovascular deaths from heart attack and stroke. And now we're talking about the impact on the children and the grandchildren. Hi,
Hey,
Chris.
Chrissy.
Hi. It's always, I'm sorry to be a bearer of bad news, but it is time, unfortunately. So we do appreciate you joining us today on Live Talk with Dr. B. Hill. So, Dr. Doug, we do wish you many more times to come, because as always, this conversation is always informational. So, yep,
Chrissy, I know some of this conversation impacts you personally.
it does. Yes.
Are these words hard to hear?
They are, absolutely. I mean, who who wouldn't think they're not hard to hear, especially when it impacts your grandchildren. So, yes, definitely.
And it's not Chrissy who was ever on opioids. It's her daughter from an accident that
Yeah,
started the whole thing.
yeah.
And how many children have been impacted?
4.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
B, we've got to hold these companies accountable.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
What a nightmare.
And like I said yesterday, this thing is far reaching. It's a lot deeper than anybody ever thought it was. And it's going to continue to plague those people out there, their generations to come.
The only way
Think
to stop
about that.
the only way to stop it is to tell these people to stop having children, and that's
How do you take away someone's right to be a parent?
Yep.
I don't have training in that. I'm not an expert in that. I don't know what to say.
So right now we have to say goodbye.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us today. Y'all have a blessed day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Smith.
This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back to Live Talk with Dr. B. Hill. We are going to continue definitely interesting conversations. So if anyone wants to ask questions, use the right-hand corner, the chat up in the right-hand corner. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
B.
you so much, Chrissy. I appreciate it. We have Travis here with us, and we have Dr. Smith here with us. And we did have a lively conversation yesterday that we would like to continue, and it's about our offspring, about the children that had nothing to do with the opioids but are suffering from them. Dr. Smith?
Dr. B, how are you?
I am much better. Thank you so much.
You look yourself. Good to see you. Travis?
Doing good, Dr. Smith. How are you? Dr.
Good.
B, how are you doing? You look
Much
wonderful.
better. Thank you. Thank
You
you.
do look good.
So, Travis, picking up on where we left off in our discussion, we said, when we ended our last discussion, we all said, goodbye. I will go and get some numbers and we will look into this. Okay. I have up until this point, been hopeful that we were just almost confusing ourselves and this isn't real. This isn't a reality. But we'll bird dog it down and, it's our, it's on us. It's our job. We'll look into this. And I was really hoping to come back with some better news. And Travis, as you know, about my background in emergency medicine, and I've delivered all kinds of news to all kinds of people, good and bad. And not surprisingly, we physicians are humans also, and it always feels better. It's always easier to deliver good news, and it never feels good to deliver bad news. And as going through this, I found myself reflecting back upon instances of being in the position of delivering bad news, and just flashbacking to some of those moments. And Chrissy, let's go to the first slide here. And Travis, I hung my hat on the peg that if we're wrong, and this DNA damage is not impacting the kids, that if we're wrong, that the first place we would see that would be in the children who had been born with what's called neonatal abstinence syndrome, which you and I both know is nothing but withdrawal. So if these kids with withdrawal went on and didn't show any bad numbers as they grew up, do you follow me?
Yes, I'm following you.
Okay, that if they didn't, if they had an episode of withdrawal and then they went on and they were completely normal, they didn't show higher incidences of learning disability, they didn't show higher incidence of autism, they had one episode of withdrawal and then they were completely normal for the rest of their childhood, that would be evidence, that would be powerful evidence that the children are not affected by the DNA damage. And it would frankly be good news for the pharmaceutical industry, the opioid manufacturers and distributors who are going to be on the hook for this. It'd be good news for them. So the first thing I wanted to know, you always got to boil it down to its essence. You got to bring it down to one question. And that's really the art of the science here, Travis, is what's the one question? For instance, in your case, Travis, it was a very simple question. When you got sick because you stopped taking the opioids, did your adrenaline levels go up? That was the one question, right?
Correct.
And in your case, the answer was profound. Agreed?
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
Right. So that's an art to this. There's an art to everything. And there's an art to science. And part of that art is to be able to boil it down to one question. In your case, it was simple. When Travis gets sick, does his adrenaline levels go up? The answer was overwhelmingly yes. They went up so high they could kill you. The question here is just as simple. The babies who have experienced at least one episode of withdrawal, as they begin to grow up, do they show a higher incidence of autism or any learning disabilities or any neurological pathologies? Travis, can you see that quote on the screen right there?
Yes.
Can you read it?
Yes. You want me to read it? Okay.
Please
Babies with withdrawal symptoms, 68% more likely to have developmental disorders than those without.
That's some high percentage, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a very high percentage. Very high percentage. I mean, that's more than half. So that's concerning.
So, Travis, our hope was we would find some evidence that we could just go, pat each other on the back and go, all right, we kind of got all, all flustered over nothing. That isn't the case. It's right there in front of you on the screen, Travis, right there in black and white.
Wow.
The first group to look at are the children who experienced an episode of withdrawal. Do they go on to show any developmental abnormalities? The answer is overwhelmingly yes. Now, you could argue that those children came from dysfunctional backgrounds. You could argue that those children came from lower socioeconomic levels. You could argue that those children came from parents who were less likely to read to them or engage with them in other activities. Or you can make up all kinds of what are called confounding variables. That yes, it's true, but it's not because of the genetic damage. And as people of science, Travis, we have to recognize and we cannot argue with that. Yes, there's all kinds of other variables here. And it may be that the very thing that led to their withdrawal is also the very thing that led to the learning disabilities, and that it was more environmental, not genetic, but environmental. And quite frankly, Travis, if the number had been 17%, I kind of would have rode with that. But it's not 17%, is it?
No, it's 68%. So that's high. That's a lot.
All right, Travis, you're in the seat of common sense today. You're wearing the common sense hat. Travis, so far, is it a good possibility that the children are inheriting the genetic damage and are showing learning disabilities because of it?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if I could base my percentage on this, but I'm gonna say maybe 68% of them. It could possibly be the same. You never know. But yes, my answer is yes.
Yeah. If Travis, just so you know, in my way of thinking, if 68% were diagnosed or reached a threshold of diagnosis, there's another group that were just under the threshold of being diagnosed. So you're probably approaching 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. I just knew it was something because, like I said, the more people we met, we met Josh, we met Samantha, they're part of the team now, and I mean, it's just everybody. It's just somebody either has a child that has autism, or they know somebody that has autism. I just thought it was too big of a coincidence, just too much, just too much for me. So that's why I mentioned that yesterday. I'm happy to hear that. Not happy to hear. I take that back. I'm happy that our hunch was correct, but unhappy to hear that it's affected this many kids, because that's not right. That shouldn't happen. And that's something that, yeah, they could have prevented this as well. This is another preventable thing that has happened if this is linked to opioids.
Travis, before we take a moment, explain to Sam where we are and what we're doing. Let me ask you one question. I want Sam to hear the answer to your question. I already know the answer because I've learned you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're the warrior. You are going to fight for others. That's who and what you are. It is Travis the warrior. We got Sam the nurse, Josh the deacon, and Travis the warrior, who's going to fight against injustices. So, Travis, I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and I want Sam to hear the answer. Travis, in your mind, has the role of the class action lawsuit changed because of this?
No, it's just now there's even more fuel to the fire for me. Now there's even more reasons to go after these people. Now there's even more anger that I have, to go after these people. I mean, so no, it hasn't changed for me at all. It's made it more important than ever to go after them, if that makes any more sense.
It has changed. it's now more important than ever.
Yes.
Because when
Yes.
Travis Warrior sees harm being done to babies, children, and grandchildren, Travis the Warrior is going to do what Travis does, and that is fight for justice.
Yes. I think that's what all of us are going to do, because I feel like we all are warriors here. But yeah, that is my nature. When I see something wrong, see somebody doing wrong, I do want to put a stop to it. That's crazy how you do know that about me. But yeah, I don't.
I already know that about you.
Yeah, I don't like it one bit, and it makes me even more angry. So I mean, yeah, it's a must more than ever now that we have to go after these people. We have to put a stop to this, and we have to change what's happening with the opioids right now. Like we have to.
Sam, can you see the screen there?
I can.
Can you read that out loud to all of us?
Babies with withdrawal symptoms, 68% more likely to have developmental delays or disorders than those without. 68%. I mean, that's a big, 1% is a big number, but if you're over 50%, that's huge. That is huge.
Sam, your
agree.
thoughts?
I mean, I'm almost at a loss, and that's uncommon for me, but I'm just disbelief that this crisis has caused, I think for myself, I could almost deal with it if it was just me, if it was just damage to myself. But now you're talking about my babies, and you're getting babies in this. The defenseless, poor, innocent children that can't fight for themselves, and not to mention the ones that, God forbid, died from those symptoms.
Mhm.
There is the children that we couldn't help, that didn't make it this far. So my thoughts are like Travis. It makes me that much more angry and that much more willing to stand up and fight whoever I've got to fight to say, stop this. It's just disbelief
It is.
Sam,
about
let's have a moment of honesty here. Let's have a moment of honesty here. Stopping something that has gotten out into the DNA of the population is a very difficult, if not impossible, thing to do. This thing has gotten out into the population. The
yeah.
DNA is gotten into the population.
And
How?
trust me, I see that firsthand. I mean, I'm living with somebody that does not think what we're doing is there, is happening. So, I'm battling it every day. I try to explain and explain and explain, and I've just got to the point where, you know what, I'm just gonna wait until it comes out in black and white and just show you. I mean, it's just unreal how do you change somebody's mind? Because like you said, it's going to be almost impossible to change to stop anything, because I mean, I've always said that, once somebody gets to a certain point, somebody with drugs, alcohol, whatever, they stop it from going in prisons, they find a way to get it in prison. There's always going to be a way. So even if, just for instance, they stop making an opioid pill, there's always going to be a way, because somebody out there knows how to make them. So there's always going to be a way that and there's always going to be people that don't want the help, that don't want to get off of the opioids. There's always people that, unfortunately, is gonna live with the damage and is gonna die from it.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I'm
Those are the ones that died too.
Yeah,
the ones that can't admit that they have a problem, and the ones that never want to change, or never want to get help, those are the ones I always see that perish due to this.
right.
And so that's the sad thing. But I want to ask y'all this: what is the definition of insanity?
Doing the
Doing
same
the
thing.
same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome.
Exactly. So to me, what the FDA is doing, and what everybody else is doing with this opioid crisis is insanity to me, because they're doing the same exact things over and over and over again, and they're expecting a different result. But really, nothing's ever changing. There's more and more people dying than ever. There's more and more stuff being linked to this crap than ever, and nothing ever changes. So it's almost like I'm to the point where I'm just sitting here thinking like, wow, like what is the meaning of insanity? Like, what you guys are doing is the meaning of insanity to me, because you're
Right.
doing the same thing expecting a different result, and it's never going to happen, not with the opioids.
Nope.
And you would think that they would see that by now.
They don't want to see it.
You know, and I mean, I said that about what if they stop making them. I know in reality, in my mind, they can't stop making them because don't get me wrong, my mom and my dad both passed away with cancer. So I am a firm believer in a pain medicine that will work for that kind of condition. Now, don't,
Of course, they have cancer.
you
Of
know,
course,
I am
100%.
I am there. So, but as at the same time as I say that, I'm also a firm believer that there's people out there, because I was one of those people that will steal that medicine, even though their parent is going through what they went through and is laying there dying from that. There's also somebody that will steal that medicine from them because they need to get high. So what do you do in that situation?
Well, it's
That
it's
pattern.
too easy to get. Okay, I have surgery scheduled on Monday, okay?
Mhm.
And I get a call today that I'm supposed to go over to the pharmacy and pick up oxycodone.
Today?
Yep, yep, yep.
Huh.
They want me to have it right there on board the minute that I come out. Yep.
Yeah, but Miss B, I will say this with surgery, because I did
Yeah,
2 surgeries without anything, and
right. So
whew,
have I.
I'm
Couldn't
I'm
figure
a
it out
young man
too.
still. I'm a young man still, and I'm not saying anything, but there's a big age difference between you and I don't know if you could handle that without you. You might. I know you're tough. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know how to explain this. I
But
regret
I
going
can
through what I
understand
went
that.
through without. I regret it. Like, it hurt so
Yeah.
bad. It hurt
I
Right.
had
so
abdominal
bad.
surgery. I had abdominal surgery 5 years ago, and I lived on ibuprofen.
Well, then
They
you're like
had
me.
Well,
You
they
can
had
do it.
a
Yeah.
that's
they
what
had a
I done
drip
too.
running, and I said, "Stop this drip." The nurse said to me, "Oh no, the doctor ordered it for you." I said, "You call the doctor right now, because if he doesn't stop it right now, I'm pulling this out of my arm.
See, you're like
So
me
you might
then.
as well
Yeah.
get it done."
Yeah.
Yeah,
By the
But
way,
and
it,
they stopped it.
by the way, the answer is what's called the process of informed consent. You offer the opioids to
Right.
someone, but you share with them the knowledge that, hey, this
The
could
knowledge
impact
of it.
your day,
But
and
no, they
that,
didn't. They did
but
not share
go
anything
forward
with me.
on a go forward
Yeah.
basis. That's how we address this issue. Dr. B,
Right.
we got 10 minutes and 3 more slides to go through.
Please
Um,
go ahead.
we're not getting back together because of the holiday for a while. Should we quickly go through these last 3 slides? I really want to share these with
I think
Travis.
so. I think
yeah.
so, and then
I
pick it
think
up
we
All
can
right,
again.
just,
all right. Chrissy, you're driving.
We have 3 shows next week, so we won't be on for Thanksgiving, but we'll be on the week after that.
All right, Sam, can you see that?
Uh-huh.
Travis, you got it.
yes.
All right, Travis, you read this one. Sam, you read the next one.
Okay, got
Okay.
it. Conclusions. Results of this novel. Analysts linking health and education data revealed that children with a history of NOS were significantly more likely to have a subsequent educational disability.
All right, let me explain this one to Sam because she missed this part earlier. Sam, we started out today, and I'm gonna be quick here. We started out today that I had a personal theory. I do not want to believe what I'm being asked to believe. I feel our
Right.
people suffered enough. I feel this
Mhm.
is an incredible insult to injury. Sam, you've suffered
Right.
enough. This should not be on your shoulders. So I
Yeah.
don't want to believe it. But what I did was I said, if this is true, then the first group we're going to see it in are the babies who had at least one episode of withdrawal.
Mhm.
If babies who had at least one episode of withdrawal go on to show developmental uh, uh, disorders, that is, it doesn't prove the theory, but it takes away the only chance we had to disprove the theory.
Right.
Okay? And in science, it's really more about disproving things than proving things. We
Right.
just have the opportunity to disprove it. Now, Sam, you see what that says right there.
Mhm.
Uh, what that is saying is that children who had at least one episode of withdrawal, okay, were significantly more likely to have subsequent educational disabilities. So, Sam, do you see that as fairly clear that
Mhm.
there is at least a possibility that this genetic damage is being inherited and is manifesting itself in the children and grandchildren in as educational disabilities?
Absolutely.
Okay, Travis,
100% clear.
Travis, you agree, disagree?
Yes, yes, I think all that can happen.
All right,
Most definitely, 100%.
let's come to the next slide. We got two more to go. Sorry to rush y'all, but
It's
we always
okay.
do. We the slides I wanted to show at the beginning of the show, we always show at the end of the show so we can say we showed them. So,
The 30 minutes just goes by too quick. It just goes by too fast.
I know it does.
all right, so
Gracious.
we're looking at
Okay,
these
this
guys
is a new one.
now. Okay, real quick, guys, real quick. Let me tell you what you're going to look at.
Okay.
I got an axe to grind with OxyContin. Okay, that drug never should have been approved. So what I wanted to do was OxyContin, just so you know, was approved in 1996.
Mhm.
I wanted to go back to the data right after OxyContin was approved, because if this theory is right, we should see a change in autism right after the approval of OxyContin. Okay,
Wow.
right? See it?
Yeah.
Hmm. You see a big, big difference.
So, guys, what we're doing here is we're probing our own theory. We're saying, hey, children who had an episode of withdrawal, if this theory is true, they should show a higher prevalence of learning disabilities. And that one got blown out of the water. So now we're saying, well, if this is true, we should see a surge beginning after the approval of OxyContin. And
Mm.
uh, I mean, that's pretty obvious, right, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump to the last slide. Now, what I want to do is pull back and go from uh, 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 the arrival of OxyContin up until today, and you guys see the climb right there.
Yeah.
317%.
17%
Okay,
since 2000.
right. So we saw the first,
Mm.
we saw that
317%.
little uptick right after OxyContin, and after that little uptick, we now see an explosion, right?
And isn't 2000 about this, like, isn't like 1997 to 2000 about the same time everything started surging in the deaths of opioids and everything?
OxyContin was approved in '96. That's your starting
Yeah.
point.
Wow. So I bet
All
you
right,
it would even match
Yeah.
up to the deaths or overdoses. I guarantee you would match up to everything.
You know, I wish
Overdoses,
you had
heart
the
attack.
cardiac death. I wish you had the cardiac deaths next to this too, and all on the same page.
Oh, wow. That would,
I bet
yeah.
you they're all going to be almost equivalent to each other.
Art,
You'll see
Art,
the same
already,
spike.
already did it.
Yep.
It. I have, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. This is the last thing I'm going to say this week. These are my final words. I tried as hard as I could to find anything that would be the life raft that I could hang on to, that this theory is not true. and
Couldn't find it.
I can't find it. I will, and
Whew.
you know about me, if it's there, I'm going to find it, and I will never stop looking. But Sam, so far, I haven't found anything to 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 turn back what almost feels like a tidal wave of evidence
Yep.
that Sam, the reality is, Sam, you've got a child with autism, right?
Yep.
That child has a profound autism, right?
Mhm.
Sam, you
It's
realize
level
what
5.
we're about is we're talking about the fact that the science is possibly telling us that the reason that your child has autism is because you were genetically damaged by the opioids.
Yep.
Opioids that should have never been out in population because they were never properly tested. By the way, we need to add Samantha. So that just makes me angry. I don't know how you feel about it, but
I mean,
I can't even say the word I want to
it
say.
I
But
can't I can't
I'm
even
livid.
describe because this is okay, so yesterday I had a meeting with Bentley's school and I'm tearing up but I'm laughing too because he's 10 years old now. And this child did not speak one word until he was 5. He didn't walk or crawl or anything until he was 2. You know, and yesterday I had an appointment. He still don't talk. He has an AC device that helps him speak. He speaks a few words and but nobody really understands him but us. And yesterday I had an appointment with his school and I thought, oh, he's got anger problems. He just burst out into anger and he's had trouble at school. We went through it with him. And yesterday I went to the school for the appointment and they praised this child so much at how far he has come because we've worked with him and worked with him so much at home and he's an A-minus student now and I've really focused on just working with him and trying to get him. I know how mean kids are. I know how mean people are. I know how people are. So I really wanted him to feel like he was a part of and just like the other kids. So I just really focused on that. And yesterday at school, they were talking about how good he was doing and how better he was reading and how he was just so nice to everybody. And it was just like a 360-degree turnaround. So when I
Wow.
left our meeting yesterday, I went straight to the school and got such a good report on him. And then, I was just so proud of him. And I took him out to eat when I got him from school and took him to buy him a toy and all this stuff. And then was talking to my husband about this last night, and then we kind of had a little round about it, because he's one of those non-believers of the damage to the DNA, and then to hear this today, it just kind of hits me in the face that you were right, that I knew that this had something to
Isn't
do
it
with it. It's just my gut
isn't
feeling.
it
I just
truly
knew.
amazing? Isn't it truly amazing that our spouses have
Yeah.
trouble believing this?
Oh, he's
And they're
he's
the
my biggest critic.
closest people
He is
to
the
us who
one.
love us and take care of us and put out their heart for us. And they
He's
are
my
having
biggest supporter,
problems.
but he's my biggest critic. He will tell me in a heartbeat that I chose to do that and that if that it was my fault, that I made that choice, that I was the one, that if I would have wanted to quit, I could have quit at any time, that I could have done this, that it was me, 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 me. And last night when I was trying to talk to him about all this, he said, there's no way that it can change your DNA. I said, I'm not saying it changes your DNA. It damaged my DNA. And he was like, and I said, just wait. I'm not even going to try to explain this to you. I've invited him to our meetings to sit in on these. Which he works during the day, so I can't really say that. But I've said we record them. You can go back and watch them. Please do that. Please look at some of our research. And so, I mean, I think he will. I think he'll come around to it, and especially when it blows up and we go big with this, he's really going to see. But he's my biggest supporter, but he's my biggest critic too, and so was my dad. And that's the ones I know. My dad's watching over me, and one of these days I'm going to show him that, hey, it's right here in black and white. Can't wait to get it done. I can't wait to get that DNA test done. Cannot wait.
Thank you
But
so
it,
much for joining us, guys. I hate to cut
oh,
it short, but as always, the time
okay.
always slides by us. So, yes, thank you so much for coming today and every week, every Monday through Thursday, live talk with Dr. B. So, thank you guys. Have a blessed one.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye.
This was a really heart-wrenching show that we had today because it affects our loved ones, our children.
Mhm.
Thank you.